Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the monthly public webinar of the Government Blockchain Association's Healthcare and Life Sciences Working Group. I am your chair of the working group and your friendly host today, Heather Flannery. It's great to be here, and I have an esteemed guest that we're going to have an amazing fireside chat with, Marquis Allen. In a moment, Marquis, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, but just really quickly before we do that, you are automatically in listen-only mode. We will be holding time for Q&A from the audience in the last 15 or 20 minutes. Go ahead and capture those in the Zoom Q&A dialog box at any point along the line, and we'll do our best to get to as many of them as we can. So with that, Marquis, what would you like to tell the world about what got you into blockchain and healthcare, and who in the heck are you anyway?
Heather, it's nice to see you. And I'm glad to participate in this latest healthcare and life sciences public discussion on things related to blockchain. My name is Marquis Allen. I'm the CEO of Clinical Squared. We are a software development company focused on creating healthcare-centric software solutions for government, for consumers, for small, medium, large practices, for folks in the healthcare services milieu. We've been in business since 2019, and we're very fortunate to be able to work with innovation technologies like blockchain, artificial intelligence, and some novel mechanisms of software to get our tools in the hands of regular folks and to folks that could benefit from them. I don't know if there's much more that I can say that you can't find by going to www.clinicalsquared.com, and you can see the products and services that we offer, the customers and the partnerships that we have, and some of the missions that we are attacking. Or well, yeah, I think attacking. We're doing it pretty voraciously.
I like the energy.
Yeah,
You are
yeah,
getting after it. That's fantastic.
absolutely. Well, and I think one of the observations that I've had, especially since the beginning of the year, we're in a very tumultuous time of change, and I think that there's a real appetite for people, no matter where you are as a consumer, as a healthcare practitioner, as an analyst, as a research scientist, etc. There's a bigger appetite for folks to be self-sufficient with the software tools that they have available to them to find healthcare services that are relevant to their experience, to be able to work effectively in their jobs. So, for example, if you work for the federal or the state government or a municipality, you have a mission that your agency needs to execute on in order to be successful and to serve people. And also, healthcare being in the state that it's in, I mean, we hear all kinds of stories about, I mean, just crazy stories about the condition of healthcare service delivery and a lot of the missteps that people experience that often lead to death, to theft, to just horrible scenarios. So I guess to round out my thought, my observation is with all of the changes that are happening in in our economy and in government and in just the way that we live in our society. I think Clinical Squared is in a really good position to show value and to offer some tools that can help ease people's journey, especially when it comes to healthcare service delivery. Um, so that's the end of my, thank you for joining my TED Talk. But those are kind of my opening thoughts.
Mhm.
where did you want to go, Heather? I have a few things that I can kind of expound on that are kind of interesting by way of describing some of the interesting problems. Interesting is an interesting word, isn't it? That that we're approaching. But where did you want to go, Heather?
Yeah. What what I'm wanting to unpack today is around the way that blockchain infrastructures can underpin the trust and assurance layer of both health analytics and AI in healthcare, and how there is a reusability and a commonality to those approaches. And um, I'm hoping to unpack for our audience, not there's a lot of things to cover, but the idea also of how ML ops and machine learning pipelines and data pipelines and analytics are a little more complicated than many people understand. And you've learned so much in that area over all of your years in health data. Um, I think that that's one of the most exciting areas of clinical squared's focus and opportunity. And there's a lot of efficiency to be had by thinking of the problem space as consistent between analytics and AI. Um, so I wanted to go there in this conversation, and I also just would like to tease out a little bit. Why did you become so passionate about blockchain in the first place? I mean, you've been at the intersection of healthcare and blockchain for quite a long time. In this, in the dog years that define this industry, 2019. I mean, that's back in the day, right? You saw something really early, and you saw the potential for impact for humanity, for people.
Oh,
What did you see, and why did it capture you?
you know that I love telling this story too, which is why I think you phrased it the way that you did. Just to give you a little bit about my background, I've been in the healthcare IT space for about 20 years now. And a lot of my time was spent in doing integrations to electronic medical record systems for large hospitals, things like document management, PACS systems, or imaging systems, and the like. And I started out my healthcare IT career at the University of Maryland Medical System in Baltimore, Maryland. Shout out to UMS. It holds a special place in my heart. And from my experience there, and in my experience consulting around the country and seeing how different healthcare organizations kind of try to solve the same problems about safe and secure data handling, garnering proper consent from patients, and so on, getting access to data at critical times. Uh, I saw how the problem manifested at the bedside when a physician can't get access to their document management system to read a result from a patient's labs as they're in the bed next to them crashing, right? There are examples that I've seen where if an individual had custody of their understandable medical record, they could they could forewarn a service provider of some of their special requirements before they come in for a visit, and that could avoid a lot of calamity. So in my journey in providing technical services to this whole framework, I had ideas in my head on wouldn't it be great if people just could carry around their medical record on a thumb drive when that was the thing. And whenever they come into a hospital, they just put it in, and everything that the physician, anything that the practice needed to know was readily apparent. They could get consent from the patient to see the things that they needed to see, and etc.
Mhm.
And I just kind of went along my merry way. Well, I had been familiar with blockchain as it came into the news in the early 20 teens, and I was patently disinterested because everything having to do with blockchain seemed to focus around fintech. But I went to a conference, a contact of mine from LinkedIn just hit me up out of the blue and said, "Hey, Marquis, you want a couple tickets to this symposium on healthcare and blockchain that's in DC, which is where I live?" I said, "Sure." And I went and I saw this wonderful speaker named Heather Flannery,
I knew you were going
who
to.
was giving a lecture on the utility of blockchain as a cryptographic technology that could secure data elements in the healthcare data cycle in a way that you could understand who owned the data, where the data originated from, whether or not you had permission to the data could be scaled, and so forth. And so the light bulb came on from that conversation back in 2018 or so. And I became very enthusiastic with learning everything that I could about the technology. So then fast forward, I know I'm on a bit of a tirade, but fast forward, I started looking on the interwebs for all the ways that I could study up on this blockchain technology. And I came across a class that was being held in Adams Morgan in DC that I signed up for. And a guy named Gerard Daché was giving a blockchain 101 and beyond class. And so that's how I met our founder of the Government Blockchain Association, Gerard Daché. We got to talking about the technology. He heard that I was in the healthcare field and was very enthusiastic about me joining the GBA and participating with creating an understanding about how blockchain could be relevant in the healthcare field. And so that's kind of the beginning of me getting really interested in innovation technology. And actually, from that point, it kind of spurred me to change my consultancy from a company where I just went to hospital systems and did integration activities and efficiency activities for systems in hospitals to teaming up with my current partner, Warren Peltz, with whom I had worked on one of these engagements way back when, and founding a software company where we could integrate blockchain technology. Since then, AI has come on the scene kind of in an explosion of fanfare, and a lot of the ways we thought blockchain could be useful in healthcare has been expanded in the healthcare industry's interest and desire, and quite frankly, their high technological arousal around AI, using blockchain as an integral part of the stack to to facilitate trust and assurance of the provenance of data. As you mentioned, when it comes to analytics and not just the results of analysis, but the origin of data, there there are several ways that uh, one could earmark data as original, but to my knowledge, using a blockchain and using the cryptographic methodologies in a blockchain to secure a data element, a result of research for drug discovery or something of that nature, um, can be done very effectively with blockchain. And so it kind of turns the wheels for us at C Squared on what problems we can solve, what challenges can we address that effectively put the power of ownership of data and the auditability of data so that people who are interested in where data comes from can be satisfied. Um, and so, yeah, I think that's a good place for me to stop, kind of mixing my origin story in with some of the things that we're addressing currently.
No, it's great. I think it's been remarkable to see the evolution of the field since that 2018 conference where we originally met. Um, Today, the things that we were conceptualizing about at that point, they're achievable right now. And it's also occurred that with this latest generation of AI, there are entirely new and very significant trust problems that weren't even on the radar at that point and are now highly urgent.
Well, just to interject, I think colleagues of ours, friends of ours that are in various scientific fields have been reporting. I mean, you can look on any of the interweb channels and see that there's a real, and I hate to drop this because I sneer at people that say that there's a war on anything, but there is a really uh, a, a fundamental shift in trusting science, in trusting the information that is discovered by scientists, just as an example. And so, and it didn't used to be that way. It is really a recent phenomena, I think, that doubt, oftentimes unnecessarily, sometimes it's necessary, but doubt has been called into play on whether or not a piece of information is true or accurate at the very least. And even the definition of truth has changed so much over my lifetime that it's hard to keep up with it. But when it comes to some of the tools that we have available to earmark the origin of something, I think it's a step in the right direction of demonstrating the path that a thought takes when it comes to scientific discovery, when it comes to health service delivery in somebody's care coordination or in their care experience.
You
So yeah,
know,
we're really excited about that.
you had a very exciting announcement last month regarding your product called Locus. Uh, and I think it would be wonderful to use the context of Locus to unpack um, what it can do today and what it will mean as increasingly blockchain infrastructures become able to be shared resources across many parties, assuring that multi-party sense of truth. I know you trained it on some really interesting payments data sets from Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, and you've got a vision for many other public and private sector actors that can benefit from the Locus vision. So, will you tell us about that? What is
Sure.
that product? What problem is it solving that has not been addressed in the world to date? And then
Yeah.
let's dig into the trust and assurance dimensions, like you were saying.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to. So Locus is the brainchild of my partner, uh, who came up with a useful, inventive way to show data in dynamic, customizable charts and graphs and mechanisms that will spark thought in the person that is searching for something. And so as a result, we're in the marketplace in a similar fashion to other data analytics visualization tools that you're probably aware of. The difference is um, we have a deep understanding of healthcare centric data. We also understand that for anybody, that's you and me, that is a research analyst that's giving a task to find a result. Anybody that uses data is most interested in how that data relates to something that they're concerned with, right? With the Locus tool, because we're data wonks for decades. Again, I'm the baby of my particular bunch at Clinical Squared, and I've been at it for 20 years. Um, we've we've kind of almost as a hobbyist approach been collecting publicly available healthcare industry data sets. And so I want to be clear that with our Locus tool currently, we've been experimenting on data that is freely available to everybody if you know where to look on the internet. Now, we've had some interesting conversations with folks in various agencies across the federal government and the state government. And we were finding that one of the big mission critical problems that these agencies voiced to us is we spent a lot of money, a lot of taxpayer dollars to build these data sets that we think are of value to consumers, to citizens. But we want to make it apparent what their value is. We want to give context to this data so that folks can apply it to their lives. And in doing so, kind of foster a more frequent interaction with this data that we as taxpayers have spent a lot of money in these agencies that we trust collecting for us. And so that was the foundation of what we built Locus on. We initially started it out way back when in its first stages, even before we branded it Locus, before we kind of knew what visualizations to use and even the data collection and aggregation approach. We started out with a couple of customers who allowed us to collate their quality measures data. So information about their readmission reduction efforts, their patient experience, the ratings on how well physicians perform different surgeries and what the outcomes were. Things that hospitals have to report to the federal government to demonstrate that they're doing a good job, and data that impacts their reimbursement. So we started by making some visualization mechanisms for a couple of our hospital partners and getting a baseline on what worked and what didn't as far as how they wanted to see data. We were fortunate enough to be able to approach a couple of agencies and find where their pain points were. And so we took it on ourselves to get access to their public data and see if there were ready connection points between my 85-year-old mom and the data that is available from NIH, as an example, for clinical trials. When we interact with people from NIH, as an example, they want folks to be able to go to the clinical trials repository that they publish and get valuable information as it relates to that person on what's available, who is recruiting for a clinical trial, and et cetera. But the interfaces out there for public data are often very complex. The average consumer doesn't have the patience oftentimes to slog through just scroll pages and scroll pages of technical jargon. And so we've sought to simplify the data that an individual returns from a search of a particular type. on some of these public sets and put it in a visualization that's compelling to them. And so add to that integrating artificial intelligence in responsible ways. We've been very careful on these public data sets that we've cultivated to create small language models that are only trained on that particular data. So I have a spoiler alert. We have a clinical trial search tool that we are buttoning up for public consumption later this month. We are going to offer it for free to users to kind of kick the tires and give us some pointers on how the data we are presenting to them could be made more valuable for them. My partner and some of my guys that have been in the clinical technology field for a while have had a real passion for clinical trials data and quality measures data specifically, and so this is something that we've really been eager about. And I have a personal attachment to creating a tool for the public on clinical trials because I have an elderly mom who's, as we all go into the phase of taking care of our parents and they have different healthcare issues, you want to find all of the options that are available. And so my mother had a conversation with me, just as an aside, had a conversation with me about an eye condition that she had that her ophthalmologist just could not give her any satisfaction on. And she said, isn't there a drug company that's trying to find a drug for this? And so I had the brainstorm, hey, let me go look on clinical trials, and slogging through that data was hard for me. And so I know my mother would have been disinterested. Long story short, we found a program at Johns Hopkins, which is a wonderful facility, does a lot of clinical trials, that I could get her involved with, and so we were able to address that. But the locus tool, to bring it back to that, is a data analytics tool that we are currently connecting different publicly available health-centric data sets to allow an end user to contextualize how some of this public data is valuable to them. We're talking to organizations that have collected data for the FDA, for CDC, for HHS, for HRSA, for CCSQ, and all the other alphabet soup agencies that are really concerned with collecting, analyzing, and understanding data about our national health situation. So we're always interested in showing private demonstrations of what Locus can do, because the mechanism of visualization and the logic built behind our small language models can easily be customized for a variety of scenarios. We're working with oncology groups that are interested in connecting their proprietary clinical trials data with public clinical trials data. We are talking to home healthcare facilities and other small practices that are interested in connecting to public data so that they can track trends of care and so forth. So I'll stop right there. That's the broad strokes of what Locus does. And again, from clinicalsquare.com, anybody who goes and sends us an email to info@clinicalsquare.com, we're definitely eager to engage with you and share more. But yeah, we have a press release about us completing a phase of a case study that we started about 2 years ago.
I
We're,
just put it in the chat for you.
yeah,
For
thank
the
you.
audience. That's the case study that Marquis is just referring to.
Yeah, when artificial intelligence became very exciting and accessible to um, the population. Um, we we've seen that folks are using AI, and we've seen the value in AI, or just call it what its original name was, what its birth name was, and that's data automation. We see the value in an automation mechanism in healthcare, being able to go through millions and millions of lines of data much more quickly and error-free than a human could. And so, but with the current excitement about artificial intelligence, we want to offer a product that can navigate some of the things that we were talking about, that the trust and assurance of the analysis that our tool can provide when matched up against different pieces of data, show you the audit trail of where that data came from, and even in some cases, and for some perspectives in that network, you can save your information, you can keep it secret, keep it safe. You can share it with people leveraging your personal consent and so forth. So we're really excited about how Locus has been expanding and the use cases that we are that are being brought to us where people are asking us, hey, can we integrate it with this or that process? So
I think it's wonderful what you're doing with Locus. I mean, clearly there's tremendous potential for reuse of the same architecture and small language model approach across any number of public and private sector enterprises. But what really moves me is that you took this at a truly human-centered perspective and wanted to demonstrate how individual people too, individual caregivers should be able to get real value from these major investments that the US government has made in health data infrastructure, public data sets, et cetera. And then to create an interface where someone like your mom could say, I've got this eye disorder and I take this medication. My vision's not so great. What might help me?
right.
Right? Just in totally plain language and be able to translate that up and back. Um, One of the things that is on the assurance level, you said uh, being able to show the audit trail of where the data came from. And so let's call that data provenance. And then there is when an analysis has been performed, whether it's joining multiple data sets or just one or however it's functioning, there's also explainability of an analysis. And then there is how a model was trained. And then there is where its input data on inference came from and what it produced and why. These are all scenarios of trust and assurance. Something that I think is really important to unpack is that in our industry, in health IT, individual problems framed as low-hanging fruit, for example, tend to be gone after, and they'll take a full stack approach to an individual problem. And blockchain infrastructures are a little different than that because they are mutualized infrastructures. They are infrastructures that can be shared across many, many parties, and they don't you wouldn't build a robust blockchain infrastructure for a single use case. That wouldn't even make sense. The economics would never work out. The numbers would never line up. But when a blockchain infrastructure is something that is shared and can support hundreds, even thousands of use cases, now you're talking about something really transformative. So tell me a little bit about the next versions and the vision of Locus and what it will mean to be able to use shared infrastructures in order to deliver on that auditability that you've mentioned.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's constantly evolving as the technology that's available for us to improve on improves itself. But we have several partners in the blockchain diaspora, if you will. One of the one of the partnerships that we have seen a lot of value from is Burst IQ, where we are integrating, for example, physician identity onto a blockchain using some of the technology that Burst IQ has been building around identity management with their proprietary blockchain. So that in that example, a physician could interact with the different data sets that we connect into that network infrastructure. They could connect with consent to the end users who sign up for using our clinical trials search tool, and the end user can save their information in a secure blockchain wallet that's understandable and easy for them to navigate, easy for them to give consent, and easy for them to share their information very discreetly to specific players, specific stakeholders in their healthcare journey. So there are a couple of different things that we're constantly working to improve. But beyond the guts of how the technology is secured with all the things that we love about blockchain, heightened cryptography, an environment where it can be public or private, and so on. We're very intent on making the user experience an intuitive, enjoyable, easy to understand, engaging, kind of sticky experience, right? We know that a lot of folks throw around the word gamification, but we really think that using your own data or managing your own information is much more engaging when it doesn't feel like work, you know? And so coming up in some of our new rounds of development, we're going to be improving the interfaces, changing some of the ways that you can see data, the types of data you can save, the types of data that you can share, all under the premise that in our environment, using our user interface, our customer experience interface, we want you to be able to connect to whatever data is contextually relevant to you and be able to act on it. Very much in the spirit of what the Web3 movement was proselytizing, you know. I see that there is room for us to grow the locus property so that it is inclusive of fintech, because for all this healthcare service that we're using, somebody's got to pay for it, right?
Mhm.
Ways that you can um, just interact with people in the healthcare environments that an end user does. From a professional perspective, because we have a deep understanding of some of the salient analysis points for the data that we have been collecting, we're looking to offer an analysis tool that can be trustworthy to the analyst. In other words, they understand and it's demonstrable where the data that they are thinking about, that they are processing, is coming from. The result set that they come up with can be attributed to them or to their organization as being where that information comes from. So that if a piece of analysis, and it could be anything, it could be in drug discovery, it could be in fraud analysis, it could be in discovery, it could be in a host of different verticals. However, the data is presented, is intuitive, is useful, is actionable by somebody that's got a slick 12-year degree and is a doctor par excellence that knows numbers and letters backwards and forwards, and she makes her living on her intellectual insights, to my 85-year-old mom that just wants to know that the doctor that keeps trying to prescribe her a particular drug is not doing it because that drug company is somehow feeding that doctor money or incentives or fill in the blank. So
Mm.
we encourage folks to connect with us at our website. I'm also easy to find on LinkedIn, and keep track of us in our journey. We know that we can't do this by ourselves, and so we're constantly looking for input. We're constantly looking for other minds to kind of weigh in on whether or not we're missing the mark. Finally, the other
Mhm.
thing that I kind of wanted to touch on is, as altruistic and benevolent as our mission is, or I feel our mission is, we really want to provide a service that helps just regular folks on up understand what is available in the wide world for them and how it relates to their data. Um, we we how can I say this? We we know that you got to make money. I choke on saying it because it's a sad state of affairs that that's kind of how we do society. Everything that gets produced is really based off of, will it make money? Less on, does it provide utility for humanity? Does it help us step to the next level of evolution or social development, and on and on and on. Having said that, we want to make sure that we, in developing Locus, developing some of our other tools, that we're not boiling the ocean, that we're not on some fanciful quest to save humanity in a way that humanity just isn't asking with their wallet for us to do. So we're always interested in input. We know that there are a lot of people out there that are very smart about this kind of thing. And so again, an invitation for this audience to engage with us and stay up with us.
So something I would love to dig into in kind of the last segment of this of this time, and audience, it is a good time to get your Q&A entered into the Q&A dialog box if you have any, and we can address some questions before we run out of time. But Marquis, thinking about the technicalities of creating a blockchain enabled trust and assurance model that spans the analytics scenarios, the data pipelines associated with them, ML ops pipelines at, in training and at runtime. Um, Over time, I'm sure you and I have both seen many barriers to getting blockchain infrastructures actually deployed and funded and operated. And one of the things that I've observed is that when there is an attempt to pair a blockchain infrastructure to a single problem or a single use case, it inevitably cannot work. And it's not because it can't work technically. It's because it can't work financially.
Right.
There's no way to support the engineering expense. It has to be secured. There's risk. It has to be underwritten. It has, all of these kinds of things. I think one of the biggest challenges has been getting um, public and private sector actors in large enterprises to think about this category of technology differently than they do other categories, where they think, oh, I've got a problem, I'm going to go buy some blockchain in order to help solve that problem. And that isn't relevant. You put a blockchain around one party's use of something or other, and that value proposition is simply not there. It's a multi-party thing. And how do you get multiple parties aligned to do anything?
Yeah. Yeah.
new class of mutualized infrastructure on their collective behalf. So that
Well,
to me is like the finest point on the business model problem that hasn't been solved, despite the incredible power of the technology and its convergence with other exponential technologies. How do you see that getting solved?
you
And
know,
what needs to get done, and how can an organization like the Government Blockchain Association contribute to that?
well, uh, it's a very interesting point. And the first thing that comes to mind is finding a unification point that makes sense to most people in the business space and the consumer space where everybody can agree that this is where a blockchain could be used. And so, I'm reminded of the quote to paraphrase that was attributed to Ronald Reagan back during the Cold War, which is a long time ago for a lot of listeners, where he opined that the surefire way for the United States and communist Russia and everybody around the world to be on the same page is if there was an alien invasion or some existential threat outside of us that everybody could unify to attack. I say that uh, to propose that the vociferous use of artificial intelligence and the extreme expense that that entails for many enterprises, even beyond healthcare, is a good place to really investigate how using blockchain to bolster what an artificial intelligence mechanism not only creates in it chopping up a question that you ask and then giving you a result set, but where it gets its data from, how that data is used, and the auditability of the data in these so-called AI black boxes. Is one way that we could kind of crack the ceiling of universal appeal for how a blockchain as a technology can be useful in ways that humans are interested. Right now, we're very interested in AI and all the things that we think that it can do, all the things that it does now. So I think that's one way. Just finding a unification of agreement of how a blockchain can be useful for everyday people. As far as healthcare is concerned, I started out my healthcare career and then continued it in seeing how these different practices are solving for the same problem statement in very different ways, but everybody agrees on a couple of fundamental things when it comes to healthcare. You want the healthcare provider to be properly engaged and informed about the patient that they are seeing, the condition they are treating, the 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 thing that they are trying to discover. The patient needs to give their permission, and their permission and their autonomy and ownership of their data needs to be um, recognized and honored. And finally, nobody really got into healthcare service provision to do it for free. Money has to change hands and so forth. And so looking at some of the use cases that engage in some of those transactions is a way to come up with a network that can be used for tracking physician credentials, tracking clinical trials research materials, tracking hospital procedural outcomes, tracking payments to folks in the healthcare milieu and so forth. It's definitely something that takes a lot of commitment from stakeholders that can pull the trigger and do small projects. The one thing also that I can't overemphasize is to get a deep understanding, well, a deeper understanding of how these technologies can work together for an organization's benefit is by doing a small, low-cost pilot. The technology of blockchain is very well understood. It's used in a lot of different verticals across the globe. Uh, Technologists that understand blockchain are readily available. And so there's really no reason for stakeholders that really want to make a difference to invest just a little bit and see how it goes, and then share their experiences, share their outcomes with the rest of the community of innovation, and help us grow this technology so that it benefits humanity.
Yeah, I think something I would add to that is, it reminds me, if anybody's a Watchmen fan, I don't know if you like Watchmen,
Oh,
Marquis,
yeah.
but
Oh, yeah.
there's a phrase in there,
The
who
watch.
watches the watchers,
Right.
right? And if mutualized blockchain infrastructures become a ubiquitous trust layer across all data exchange, analytics, and AI training and at runtime deployment, massively multi-agentic, fast forward moving value chains and economies. How do we trust the thing that we've implemented to, and what, after all, these things do have relationships to actual human beings. There are bad actors. There is negligence. There are cybersecurity risks, compliance risks. There's so many different ways that a mutualized infrastructure could go off the rails. Um, Something that the Government Blockchain Association is working really hard on is answering that question: who watches the watchers? How is it that if you are implementing blockchain infrastructures in order to support 1 or 1,000 use cases, how do you know that what you are implementing, or how it is being operated, or how it is being secured, or even the architectural choices involved in it are actually trustworthy, especially if you're not a deep technologist from that field able to arrive at an independent opinion of your own and trust it. So the Government Blockchain Association has created something called the Blockchain Maturity Model, or the BMM for short. In the Healthcare and Life Sciences Working Group, Marquis, you personally led an enormous amount of work translating the blockchain maturity model into the unique considerations of the healthcare industry. And we're continuing forward with that in areas like your clinical trials search, for example, on creating narrower fields of reference for specific applications in healthcare and life sciences, and extending that trust model from the infrastructure layer up into repeatable patterns of use cases. Um, you've seen the evolution of the blockchain maturity model over these past years. I'd love to know, maybe you could provide to the audience, coming in from healthcare, maybe less exposed to blockchain, why something like the blockchain maturity model and that standard can be a really important bridge between knowing how to begin feeling confident in the early choices connected with adoption, and then also moving beyond pilots and being able to really ready to scale to the mass adoption and the mass impact we've all been working toward. What have you to say about the BMM in closing?
Well, yeah, I'm excited that we undertook building a blockchain maturity model starting in, I think it was 2021 or 2022. I'm a little fuzzy on the actual time, but it's been several years since the mechanism of this maturity model has been in development, and the GBA, having been around for almost 10 years, has become a global authority that folks look to for part of the value exchange for the GBA. Part of its mission is to educate the world on blockchain, on the technology, what it's good for, what it's not good for, and to connect the network of folks in that innovation space together so we can share ideas and et cetera. If you are a healthcare facility, and healthcare facilities, much like the federal government, much like municipal governments, very risk averse. They don't often adopt innovation out of hand. It takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of reassurance. The GBA, being that trusted advisor to the innovation space, I think is the right contributor to this kind of guidance. The BMM gives a delineation and an understanding and a definition of what makes a particular product a blockchain, what elements of a blockchain are incorporated into a particular solution, how mature or immature those solutions are, all in the guise of informing, just to take my example, a hospital system that wants to use a blockchain for their formulary, or is interested in a better, more secure and more granular method to inventory all of the pharmaceuticals that they transact with, and even connect into the supply chain on where this fentanyl that's in the pharmacy came from and where it's going. A blockchain is a handy use for that, but not to digress. That hospital system is very leery about putting untested, so to speak, technology in a place where so much risk, so
Oh,
much so
and
much
rightfully
responsibility.
so, right? Like rightfully so. They
Right.
have to be. It should be.
Yeah. So the BMM and the healthcare supplement to the BMM, the supplements for all of these different industries is very useful for that. So I'm happy to be a part of that effort.
Thank you, Marquis. Hey, we've got a couple of questions from the audience. I'd love if we can if we can take them quickly. Can you give it 2 or 3 more minutes so we can do a quick take on these questions? Um, okay, so the first question is from Johan, and thank you. Johan's asking if we can comment on more precisely how blockchain can aid in superior data acquisition, for example, leading to more multimodal AI, more multimodal analytics, and overcome the challenge of having a tremendous idea to train an excellent model, but simply being unable to legally acquire the required information. Um, I think this is a very high potential area of impact. What say you about the role of blockchain for data acquisition for clinical AI training?
Oh, okay. Well, so that's a really good question, and one that we've been batting around within C squared. Think of the role of a research scientist who is working for a drug company and doing drug discovery to find something to cure, the common cold. That research scientist is very intent, I would imagine, on their intellectual property being attributed to them. Oftentimes, I think, depending upon how a clinical trial or a research and development exercise that I'm describing, sometimes I think that those efforts might be stymied because the researchers that are engaging in the research don't trust that they're going to share their information with their colleagues and somebody's going to steal it, you know? And so just off the top of my head, being able to properly attribute a piece of information to an originator of that information, I think is a game changer in how data can be used and can be resourced, especially in the cases of AI. And then finally, anybody that's been paying attention to the popularity of AI has seen some of the problems with AI stepping over people's copyrights for their intellectual property now. With a system that integrates a blockchain so that your data that you come into the door with is safely and accurately and securely attributed to you, I think puts a good deal of comfort and a good deal of relief with the players. So folks are more interested in doing the science of actually trying to solve for the problems that are put before them, and less about securing their place at the table, making sure that their intellectual value is not diminished or co-opted.
Our chief scientific officer at AI MINDSystems Foundation, both know that we both know well, Dr. Sean Mannion likes to say scientists would rather share toothbrushes than their data.
Right.
I just had to pile on what you were saying there. I would also add a couple of key ideas. Blockchain technology brings together this, let's call it this triumvirate of a trust and assurance layer connected to a defined identity and a verifiable identity connected to a granular consent. And by granular, I mean it can be time-bound, context-sensitive, limited to specific data, characterizing the degree to which it's pseudonymized, anonymized, or identified. It jurisdictionally bound. You can create any kind of metadata surrounding a consent operation and making it granular and enforceable, and then knowing the party to whom that is attached in a universal way. That triad right there means that all of the data in the universe that cannot be shared today due to compliance reasons effectively can be, but the pathways through the data subject, it's mediated by the person, it is done with the person. We cannot move to the next level of what our industry is capable of doing by going around the patients. We must form data partnerships with patients and support their needs. And by including individual people, the data subjects, the patients themselves, it effectively opens every possible data acquisition scenario into a model that can be made to be compliant through the granular and context-specific, revocable, auditable consent of the party that is the data subject. So that's a biggie. We have one other question. This is from our friend Ryan Munn, also a very active participant at the Government Blockchain Association. Ryan wants us to comment on decentralized science. And particularly, he's highlighting the opportunity to reduce duplications of efforts through shared infrastructures and utilize new kinds of incentive structures that could drive collaboration across organizations, large and small, and with individual people, where today the incentives for that just don't line up. The incentives is for everyone to huddle in their silos and stay there, instead of for having the value proposition of collaboration on data clearly be stronger than the negatives or the risks associated with that collaboration. So you've been working on clinical trial search and some, many interesting things in this field of science. I want to give you the last word on reacting to that question from Ryan. And thank you, Ryan. Great question.
Yeah, so the word decentralized has kind of stuck in my craw over the past couple of years, because I have yet to see an environment using a blockchain that's truly decentralized. Even going all the way back to the granddaddy of blockchain, Bitcoin is not a fundamentally decentralized network of exchange anymore. And so I like replacing decentralized with uncentralization, because when it comes down to it, um, our data, especially within our cohort, is very centralized because that's how it gets created. If I'm part of a scientific uh, entity and I'm working with a couple of other developers or researchers, the information that we collect is very centralized, right? But then how do we share that with, I guess what the crux of the question from Ryan is how do we share that in a way that is safe, is secure, is consent driven, and so forth. I know that health information exchanges have been attempting to do something very similar for a long time, even before blockchain became a viable
For sure.
technology. And so we've got examples of how it can be done. So I'm thinking of CRISP in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. It started in Maryland. It's a repository that many regional hospitals, and I'm given to understand that CRISP has expanded to other states, but many regional hospitals can share information about common patients so that the continuity of care can be unbroken if a patient sees one practitioner in one hospital and then has an episode of care in another hospital. How do you share that information? I think it's really about communal. It's a lot of the problems that we have aren't technological in nature. They're really sociological. So I think that uncentralized um, scientific efforts where data is shared in a way that's useful is all a matter of creating the right relationships with the parties that you want to share information with, creating the understanding of how data will be shared, um, putting those rules into the governance model for your infrastructure, the tokenomics, if you will, but understanding that the results can can inform a greater audience than just what you're after. The example of being able to share information between research cohorts, for example, can inform a manifold other groups that are trying to do the same thing. So without going on to too large a tangent, that's a big question to answer. And Ryan, I'm looking forward to the next time we talk on one of the healthcare life sciences working group meetings, and we can unpack that a little bit more. Really good question.
I have to pile on with one point. I'll see your sociology and raise you economics. And
Oh yeah, it all comes back to that, the money.
I,
Yeah.
right. I think this opportunity of the most traditional, the simplest form of incentive for any behavior is compensation that treats actors in an economy as if they have agency and choice, and where every transaction is voluntary and mutual and so on. Um, Blockchain gives us a tremendous opportunity to make compensation for a variety of things that are not easily automated in today's model, straightforward. Um, that everything to do with the sharing of data and the use of data, whether it's for analytics, AI, for care coordination, what have you. Those are all opportunities where a simple remuneration may be all the incentive that's needed, and we can create entirely new payment rails around new compensation structures that I think can actually absolutely work if we can make it go. So that's but I couldn't agree with you more about the socio-technical dimensions.
You're
And I
right, but I'll see you and I'll raise you just this, and then we can split. We are deeply rooted in the open source community. All of the solutions that Clinical Squared builds is on open source architecture, and it's very important because of the value that we've gotten from not using proprietary stack elements and being able to go to our community that are involved with open source
Mhm.
because for a lot of them, it's the right thing to do. So the right thing to do oftentimes is enough incentive for a lot of people, especially when we're talking about healthcare and that kind of stuff. But your point is well made. Everybody wants something for, their time expenditure or the pleasure of their company, as it were. And so I agree with you. But there are communities out there that are ready to engage in this kind of innovation because it's the right thing to do.
uh, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I do think altruism is our strongest motivator in as human beings across the board, and that I support that position. Well, Marquis, thank you so much for joining us as our guest speaker today. It was wonderful to hear from you and learn from you. And audience, thanks for being here. And until next time, we will see you next month.
Yes, indeed. Take
All right.
care.